Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers and their fans have been looking for a signature win all season long. No better night to get it than against the hated Boston Celtics. The Lakers fully up on them, 117-102, the final score at Staples Center. Big nights for LeBron James on a night where the lineup looked kind of interesting, and LeBron had some interesting things to say earlier this week about Frank Vogel's job security. I wonder how all of these things are related. We'll talk about it next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Want to thank everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day. Monday through Friday, we get this thing up bright and early for you. So no matter where you are, what time you make any podcast your first listen, you can make this one your first listen. We certainly appreciate it. Want to let you know as well that this episode of Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Truebill. Truebill is the new app that saves you money by helping you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't want or need, and can even negotiate better deals on those you want to keep. Like Andy, maybe Frank Vogel has a subscription to a job hunting site that maybe he doesn't need to keep as much after Tuesday's 117-102 thumping of the hated Boston Celtics.
If it is, by the way, a subscription to a job site, I can only assume it's Indeed.
It ought to be.
Yes. I mean,
that will help him. That will help both employers find him and him find prospective employers.
If he'd like to expedite this process, and I hope he doesn't have to, do it right, Frank.
I'll be honest with you. Should Frank, and I am not lobbying for this, but should Frank Vogel find himself unemployed, he shouldn't require a job hunting site to know which NBA positions are open.
You know what?
I'm just saying.
At the end of the day, Frank Vogel, if that happens, and like you, I'm not lobbying for it to happen, he will just be another unemployed person in this country who could use all the help he can get.
That's right. Maybe he's looking for a change in what he wants to do. Anyway, so we will talk about LeBron James and what he said about Frank Vogel earlier this week in terms of Vogel's job security, and we'll get to the lineup. The Lakers leaned into going small. They also started Avery Bradley. So, Vogel, I think, if nothing else, is dedicated to providing daily podcasters content, which we appreciate. But let's start with this game, because we came into this, we previewed the game, Andy, with John Corrales of Locked On Celtics, saying the Lakers haven't had anything even close to a signature win. That maybe the Miami game where they beat a Jimmy Butler-less squad.
The most signature win that they had, I mean, unless you really want to put a lot of credence into that thumping of Sacramento, was probably the loss to Milwaukee, because it was the best that they looked against a quality team, and they gave them a legitimate game. They just happened to lose. But that says something, that when that was maybe the closest thing you had to a signature win this season.
When you lose your signature win, it's not a good sign.
Am I wrong? No,
you're not at all. I mean, it's probably the best game they played this year, especially, no LeBron that night and whatever. So they come into Tuesday's game, and, Boston is a disappointing team in the same way, in some ways, as the Lakers are. But, the context is much different. Boston, as Frank Vogel pointed out at the end of the game, I think the second best, team offensively in the league over the last 10 games. I think they were 9-4 over their last 13 after being a couple games under 500. So, the Celtics certainly came into this game playing much better, even without Jaylen Brown. And, look, I mean, the Clippers struggled. They've got injury issues, and they beat the Lakers on Friday. Like, vulnerability is not a prerequisite for the Lakers suddenly looking really good. They've made vulnerable teams look great over the course of the year. So Tatum goes off at the beginning of Tuesday's game. He's got 14 points in the first 5 or 6 minutes, and you're like, oh God, this is going to be one of those where we get back to Frank Vogel's job security type conversations. But after that, man, the Lakers, first and foremost, before we get to LeBron and Westbrook and everything else, locked the bleep down defensively, and that looked good.
Yeah, from start to finish, even during the period where Tatum was getting his shots off, the Lakers looked as focused and dialed in defensively over the course of 48 minutes, I think, as we've seen them this entire season, particularly when you take into account the quality of competition and like who they were actually playing. And this was, I said to you when we were going back and forth before the game, just about things that we had noticed and that we wanted to get into. This was just, from an overarching perspective, Brian, the most that they looked like a team, period. Like this was the most that these guys have come out looking like they were actually on the same page, aware of what everybody else was going to be doing over the course of a game, what they're supposed to be doing, how they're supposed to be reacting to what everyone else is doing. Like they looked like an actual team with a game plan that they were adhering to. And I recognize this sounds like an incredibly low bar to clear, but the reality is they have not looked like that over this year to this point where we're at. And, it's significant because if this is all of a sudden a trend in the right direction, you look at this game and go like, all right, this is actually not only something that can be built on, like this is something that looks promising.
Well, right. And it's funny because after we'll hold on to this topic here, and get to it in a second. But after the Sacramento game, Frank Vogel was very chest puffy. The team was very enthusiastic and kind of maybe got a little bit over their skis in terms of what that second half could mean, and turned around and lost against the Clippers. Much more measured in their response from LeBron and AD on down. Frank Vogel, nobody quite like, okay, if we can do this, we can, this is, we showed some signs. We got a long way to go. Like a lot of that, while acknowledging that they played well. I mean, and they should. Like it was an encouraging night for them. But they gave up 42 points in the middle two quarters, and Tatum got loose again a little bit at the beginning of the fourth. But significantly, nobody else on the Celtics produced in any meaningful way. Their second best scorer was the Time Lord, Robert Williams.
He played great.
He
played really well.
He had a nice game. But he was also a -20 on the night. So when the Lakers lit him up, he's supposed to be their defensive anchor. When he's out there, Dennis Schroeder, it was 1 of 6 from the floor, made 10, 8 of 10 free from the line, finished with 10 points. Very quiet game for.
We learned something, by the way, Brian, during this game. Dennis Schroeder is the FOH baseline for a tribute video. Like he's the point where you say FOH, man. We're not doing this. Yeah, there was no Donka Shane video for Dennis Schroeder, because around the league, returning players, and the Lakers have been no exception, often get those thank you videos, which, full disclosure, I don't care at all. I think it's nice. It doesn't bother me at all. I think it can be classy, even if it seems like it's too much. Schroeder was the guy who they said, all right, man, we are not doing the dance. And it's good because he got booed every time he touched the ball. Laker fans do not like that Schroeder did not opt to take their money.
It's true. They're very angry about that.
You know what? I mean,
it's funny. They'd be booing him if he did take their money too.
Right.
But they're very angry that he didn't.
Well, I mean, it's very, it's not me, it's you. Like they were really, and I can understand the idea that Dennis Schroeder would say $84 million in hand is not enough. I'm going to take my chances and expect to get more and leave you guys, the Lakers, 17 championships high and dry. Yeah, that becomes the FOH baseline.
I'm glad you broke up with me, but how dare you break up with me?
Exactly.
But the point being that defensively, nobody else on the Celtics did anything. Tatum finished with 34, but it was front loaded to that first quarter and back loaded to a fourth quarter where the Lakers were comfortably ahead. And it was the other part of this though is energy and effort. Like, and we'll get, I guess, a little bit to this with the Avery Bradley was again in the starting lineup, but for a team that the players and certainly the coaching staff has emphasized over and over again, doesn't always play hard enough. Especially, as the game got into the second quarter and Tatum cooled off a little bit, and certainly the third quarter when they really cranked it up over those last 6 minutes after a very raggedy start for both teams. Like okay. Like that looks like 2020. Like that's how they played. They played with their hair on fire. And when you need those connective parts of your defense to operate properly, you need that energy. If one guy's not quite playing with the effort, if two guys aren't quite playing with the effort, the rotation is a half step too slow. And now everyone's scrambling. Like, that's the effort part of it. And so I suspect those two things are related, Andy. And it starts with the engagement of LeBron James, who was deeply engaged in this one on both sides of the ball from the jump. We'll talk about that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Calm. You know what makes LeBron James King James besides defensive engagement? Sleep. That's right. Sleep is his superpower, and Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation. They've teamed up with LeBron James to help you activate the power of sleep. LeBron and Calm know that your mind is like any other muscle in your body, but you don't have to be a world champion to learn how to use it. Calm helps you train your brain so you sleep better, reduce your stress, and perform at your best like LeBron James. So head to calm.com/LockedOnNBA. For a limited time, you get 40% off a Calm premium subscription. You have access to the nature scenes that LeBron loves, like Rain on Leaves. That is actually really peaceful. It helps
I
you
love
get
Rain
into
on Leaves. Yeah,
it helps you get into a great headspace. It helps you keep the main thing, as LeBron would say. So again, for a limited time, our listeners can join LeBron in using Calm and get a 40% discount on a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/LockedOnNBA. Unlock content that helps you focus, ease stress, and sleep better. Again, get started at calm.com/LockedOnNBA. That's calm.com/LockedOnNBA.
Hey, Andy, you know who else is keeping the main thing the main thing?
Who?
Our friends at Built Bar. And this holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It legit does. Or even better than a candy bar. It's a Built Bar, and it's filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazingly low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat. And yet it's high in protein, so you get yoked when you eat these things. So it's the best of both
One
worlds.
bar is all it takes.
Just lift the Built Bar up to your mouth, and you're building muscle. Delicious
It's
and healthy.
amazing.
That is not clinically proven. You still have to exercise. So many flavors. You have a hard time.
It is not clinically nor anecdotally proven.
I gotta keep going. We have raspberry and mint brownie, Cheerio double chocolate, cookies and cream, peanut butter brownie. Like it's all, the hardest thing about this whole Built Bar thing is choosing your flavor. Built Bar gives you that extra fuel you need to bust down those mall doors and battle the holiday shoppers. Or if you're just standing in endless shopping lines, Built Bar can give you that something extra to keep you going. Throw one in your jacket or purse. You never know when you're going to need it. Curbside pickup is also an option if you want to avoid violence this holiday season. If you're friends with Santa, tell Santa to throw a few of those Built Bars into your stockings. There's just options aplenty. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Again, built.com using the promo code LOCKed15 and get 15% off your order at built.com. Andy, it makes a difference when LeBron James is paying attention on both sides of the ball. He came out very aggressive offensively, which he's done before. Not as much as I think people would like, but a lot of feels out the game. But defensively, he was locked in from the beginning.
Yeah, you saw this in the first quarter where he got back in transition and he bothered a Jayson Tatum fast break at the rim into a miss. And I remember when that happened going like, all right, this feels like a game where LeBron is actually looking to make a statement on both ends of the floor. And, it's something that he needs to do because he was the one who said in the last game that they played, I was pretty bleepy defensively. Like, he has talked about how he likes playing small ball
he wasn't
five.
Talking about sleep.
No. And ironically, this was a game where he didn't really play small ball five. Dwight Howard ended up as the backup center in this game. So when LeBron was playing with the second unit, he was playing at the 4. But he called himself out, saying that his defense was not good enough. And, with LeBron, you always wonder, like, okay, what is that going to lead into? Because there are always those questions about how much is he going to pace himself over the course of a season? How much does he need to pace himself? And then what are the effects of when he does it? Because even if you think it's justified and sensible and pragmatic, there's still an on-court effect. Like there's something that has to be accounted for. This was a game where LeBron just said, screw it, man. I am playing defense for every minute I'm on the court.
And look, the answer for me is it's not sustainable. Like you can't have him go like, pick and choose your spots where, big game at home. Lakers really needed this win. They really did. It is it was their 25th regular season game. They're 13-12 now. if I'm keeping track. Like you, at some point, you got to string some wins together to get yourself a little separation from this massive group in the middle of the conference, to get yourself up to where, a 4 seed or home, and just to start feeling good about yourselves and put yourselves in a position to, to be able to compete with these better teams. You don't want them doing that every night, but whether it was a national TV game, whether it was Boston, whether it was related to the stuff we're going to get into in a second in terms of what LeBron is saying about Frank Vogel, and
or what he's not saying,
or what he's not saying, but not wanting to be attached to the idea of getting him fired. Whatever the reason was, personal pride based on the Clippers game. This is what it looked like, and the downstream impact of that when you have Anthony Davis, who was elite on the boards with 16 rebounds. Vogel talked about after the game, one of the reasons they were able to sustain their small ball play and play so well is they were not getting hammered on the glass, which is something that has been typically happening to them all season long. When they can rebound, they can stay with those lineups, easier to stay with those lineups. Those lineups are more successful, and Davis was crucial to that. And then, it opens up space when they play defense, that lets them play faster. When they can play faster, they can go downhill. And when they can go downhill, Russell Westbrook can dominate.
Yeah.
And he was great again on Tuesday.
He started out a little bit rough. I think he missed his first 4 shots, and he missed back-to-back threes. They actually had on the same possession.
Right. I was feeling that was one at the beginning of the game when I was feeling deeply cynical about the Avery Bradley choice of look, the offense has been designed to get Russell Westbrook open threes, and it's working.
Well, I mean, the guy that I really felt bad for in that situation was Anthony Davis, because he really worked hard for that particular offensive rebound.
Kicked it out to Russ.
Yeah, and to see Russ to put up that 3 with, I'm guessing, at least 21 seconds left.
Well, yeah, the reset to 4. Does it reset to 14? Whatever 14, it was. It was a second after.
Yeah, it was at least 11, 12 seconds. AD's got to be
quick.
Really,
why does that always happen that way? Like, whenever a team gets an offensive rebound, the next guy feels like they have to shoot in less than 3 seconds. It always happens that way.
My guess is either you're just kind of psyched and feeling the adrenaline of the dude who did all the work to get you that offensive board, or you're hoping to catch a defense while they're scrambled.
Right. That's true. But it is worth noting, Andy, that the 3 3-pointers that he missed in that 12-second sequence or whatever were 3 of the 4 that he took in the entire game.
Yeah.
The other one was in the second half. So, I mean, the rest of it, again, was all downhill.
For that matter.
So it was 9 of 12 inside the arc.
For that matter, LeBron only took 5 threes in this game, and he's averaging about 8.5 on the season. Mm-hmm. And LeBron, this was the best, I think, from the first quarter to the end of a game that LeBron looked finishing in this game. We've talked a lot, Brian, about how his finishing has not been nearly what we're used to from LeBron. We are hopeful that it's just reminiscent of last season when he began slow and began to become more efficient around the rim as the season went along. But it helped that he was able to get in transition so much, because
that was exactly what I was thinking.
He is LeBron, if you give LeBron regular opportunities on the break, he's going to finish.
He's not going to get. Nobody wants to get in the way of that. It's when you have to, when he's got to muscle through people in the half court, when he's got to elevate, through people in the half court and establish set defense. But you're right. I mean, it is not a mystery that the defense, or that Westbrook was. I said that wrong. He was 8 of 12 from inside the arc. LeBron was 9 of 13, 13 of 19 overall, and I'm doing the math here real quick. 11 of 14 from inside the arc. That's not an accident that it happens on a night where the Lakers are also excellent defensively. It's also not an accident that it happens on a night the Lakers only turn the ball over 14 times. So all of this stuff matters. And I just, if they play defense like this, they're going to win a lot of games. I don't know how sustainable this particular level of defense is every night, but if they're mostly this good. Like, I mean,
well, here's the thing: they may not always be this good defensively. They're not always going to be this effective. And like you said, Boston missed some shots. The Lakers actually spent the first half of the game sending them to the line a lot.
Yeah.
And that's still something that even when the Lakers, they're rotating well, it seems like they're really communicating well and stuff like that, they still send guys to the line way too much. But more often than not, if they play with this type of focus and intensity and purpose defensively, the type of effort that has been, very nakedly, obviously missing over the course of this season, if they do this more often, it's going to work out. It's going to be good.
Before we get to the LeBron and Vogel stuff and just kind of the dynamic here, real quick, Austin Reeves did not play and hasn't played much since coming back from the hamstring thing. Hasn't played particularly. Let me rephrase. He did play, but he didn't play when it mattered. He and Bazemore both played 3 minutes of garbage time.
Right.
And so Reeves is essentially fallen out of the rotation. Bazemore out of the rotation. Jordan
Bazemore's
out of the
been out for a
rotation.
while.
Right. I'm just sort of naming, Rondo never really in it unless you need him specifically. And he seems cool with that. Yeah. Aside from inserting Ariza when he's back, because he will play.
Oh, yeah.
This looks like the rotation that Vogel has settled into. Again, I'd love to see in my lineup Ellington sub in for Bradley in that starting lineup, especially if they're going to start THT. At least until Ariza comes back. I could see Ariza starting once he's back. But like this is the group. And it's, I guess, a matter at this point of organizing them, because I do think this deal with Dwight playing 12 to 15 as the backup center is what it's going to look like. I don't think he's going back to both of those guys playing and all that stuff. And when Ariza's back, he has even fewer excuses to do that.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, as far as Reeves goes, the first couple games he's been back from that hamstring injury, he has not been good at all. And right. I don't know if the hamstring is still bothering him or if he's just incredibly rusty. Whatever it is, he doesn't even look like the player that you count on to do some of the little things and the wheel greasing and just being in the right spot, stuff like that. He frankly has looked pretty bad. And if you are a rookie that's not looking good, you're going to lose the confidence.
You don't get much.
Yeah, you're going to lose the confidence of most coaches.
That's fine.
I mean, unless you are like a special rookie, and do respect Austin Reeves, he's not that guy. I agree.
And Monk is playing better. The need for Reeves to fill space. Ellington is back. And some of Reeves's really good play, kind of, THT is back. Like, there is less space for Reeves to do these things.
It's not shocking to me, and I frankly don't really have a problem with it at all. The Avery Bradley of it all, man, like this is like the non-sexual version of Brokeback Mountain. Just I wish I knew how to quit you. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Frank Vogel is ever going to let Avery Bradley out of this rotation. And I know Laker fans are sitting around waiting for Vogel to say, I know how to quit you. But right now it's just, I wish I knew how to quit you.
It doesn't know how to do it.
I mean, like we were talking before we started recording, like it would be one thing in this game if it felt like Avery Bradley had a specific matchup that theoretically makes sense for Avery Bradley to be out there. I mean, like put aside whether or not you think Bradley is the defender that Vogel clearly thinks he is, but just something where it's like on paper, all right, I get it. That's why he's there. He didn't even have it in this game.
No, he started THT because they needed somebody to try to guard Jayson Tatum.
Right. And then Russ was doing it for a while. Like Avery Bradley, if he ended up on Jayson Tatum, it was largely because of a switch or by accident or whatever.
But at the same time, they have Marcus Smart, they have Dennis Schroeder, and Schroeder was a non-factor in this game.
But I don't
just Jayson Tatum.
I don't get it though. If you're going to be, and again, let's preface all this by saying the Lakers won the game. Avery Bradley clearly didn't get in the way of it, and
he was a big part of that defensive push in the third quarter.
And it is
slow start in the first, but a big push in the third.
And Frank Vogel's being flexible with going smaller than would be his druthers, all that stuff. I get it. But if you're going to be starting Tatum and Horton-Tucker, which I think it's debatable whether or not you should be starting him either. But if you're going to be starting him, I feel like you need to be taking Bradley out for a true shooter, like somebody who's definitively going to be
genuinely has gravity to
right.
create
I mean,
the spacing that you need.
At that
THT
point,
was 0 for 5. I actually didn't think he played a bad game, but he was 0 for 5. From
he was
3-point
wild.
range.
He was wild for a lot of the game.
He was, but I was
been
okay
wild
with it. But I was, I like the defensive effort. I was not upset with what he was doing.
That's fine.
But he was over. But the point about floor spacing, he was 0 for 5 from 3-point range, and he cannot, after that hot start, he cannot be counted on as a person who can stretch the floor. So that's how you end up with 3 Russell Westbrook 3-pointers in 12 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's something that I don't totally understand. I think it goes back to what we've talked about before. Like Vogel likes what Bradley embodies. And I think in a lot of ways, Bradley feels like an extension of Frank Vogel on the court. And this is just something he's going to do. And there's only so much I guess you expect any coach to completely abandon their principles. And I think Avery Bradley is just kind of that line in the sand.
Yep. All right, so let's get to LeBron and Vogel, because it's just an interesting part of having LeBron on your team, and what that does from a coaching perspective. We'll talk about it next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Bet Online. Back better than ever. They've got a new web interface for the basketball season, more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online remains the #1 spot for all basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website. Sign up today. Receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive that bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. Bet Online, the fastest, easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. Bet Online, where the games start.
So was it Monday at practice, LeBron was asked about Frank Vogel and the work that he's done this year, kind of, hey, is Frank doing a good job?
It was Monday.
And so he responded, I think criticism comes with a job, Frank is a strong-minded guy. He has a great coaching staff, and we as his players have to do a better job of going out and producing on the floor. We're a team and an organization that don't mind some adversity, that don't mind people saying things about us, obviously, because it comes with the territory. So, he certainly wasn't critical. And I will note, he very explicitly said after Tuesday's game that the coaching staff gave them a great, game plan, and the players had to go out and execute it. And they did, which is something they haven't done throughout the season. But, it was neither a condemnation of Vogel in terms of, this guy, I've certainly seen less support from a player towards a coach.
Luke Walton.
Yeah. But at the same time, it wasn't a full-throated, this is my guy. He's doing a great job. It's, he pointed back to the players. It was basically Switzerland. And what was your interpretation of why?
I mean, look, with LeBron, there's always going to be some guesswork, and maybe that's the point. LeBron is very famously passive-aggressively cryptic with messaging, and he does it very intentionally. There's a history of this. You could paint it or you could interpret it as him souring on Vogel. You could interpret it as him not wanting to be painted into any particular corner. You could interpret it as him, the penchant that he has for keeping people on edge. You could interpret it as, I think, a pretty well documented indifference for the most part to who coaches him, unless your name is David or Blatt. Right.
And then he's aggressively anti-you.
Right.
Or, he's pretty pro-Ty Lue.
Sure.
He's a big Ty Lue fan.
Right. He's a big Ty Lue fan, and after a while became a pretty big Eric Spoelstra fan. But for the most part, there's been some degree of indifference with LeBron, or if nothing else, a lack of true commitment one way or the other. He may want to be keeping some degree of distance with this stuff because he already has the reputation of Le GM. It was interesting that he talked before about how, the coach and the front office and everybody put together this great roster and left himself out. And on one hand, he's not going to say, I did this. But on the other hand, he knows, everybody knows, he did this. So, LeBron does that. He will be as hands-on or hands-off as he feels he needs to be in a moment.
I took a lot of it as, I think you're right. All of these things, a lot of them are probably true at the same time. I think fundamentally more than anything, his comments were designed to not. There's no way for him to be neutral. If he's too over the top in support for Vogel. If there comes a time where the Lakers really do, they lose 6 in a row, and you got to pull the trigger on something. He's got to turn this thing around in one way or another. They don't have a lot of levers to pull. This is one of them. Fair or not, probably not. That's just the way the world works. Then all of it, well, LeBron James didn't want, okay. Or if but if they do decide, he also doesn't want to be like the guy who pushed him out the door either. I think he thinks Vogel's perfectly fine. And
that could have said he's a good coach.
He could. And I think, if somebody, I'm being very curious to see if somebody asks the question. He was asked it was Bill Plaschke at the Times, kind of asked him kind of a 2-part question. And he didn't answer the second part about the work that he's doing, kind of the is Frank Vogel a good coach kind of thing. He sort of left that part out.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's not because LeBron forgot that part of the question, because that guy has a photographic memory.
Does have a very good memory. The other part of it is, and the reason I think he is not pushing for Vogel to get fired, and certainly doesn't want to look like he is, gets to the other part of the things that it looks real bad for him if this season is going south because of the move that LeBron and AD really helped engineer. It is a bad look for LeBron if that gets his coach fired, especially, and to tie this to the work that he did against Boston on Tuesday, especially if it's combined with LeBron isn't as active and engaged as he needs to be, given what he did to the roster. And I'm not blaming LeBron for the Westbrook trade. I think he's part of it, and Pelinka is too, because
Jeannie Buss is part of it.
Jeannie Buss, everybody's part of this because this is what the Lakers are. It was very on brand. There was
but also,
weird about what they did.
They didn't make the move then call Jeannie. I mean, she signed off.
All right, no, but you understand my point. Trading for Russell Westbrook is super duper on brand for the Lakers. It's not weird. And if Vogel is going to have to go at some point, I am pretty sure LeBron's going to make sure it's at the end of a stretch where he's really playing hard and playing well. And so you can't pin it on LeBron wasn't playing to even keep his coach's job. It's just my interpretation. I don't think he's trying to get Vogel fired.
Or he was actively playing in a way to get Vogel out the door. Look, for what it's worth, I have never gotten the impression that LeBron, wasn't impressed in some way by Vogel. He's talked before, it's been a while, but he's talked before about being impressed with Vogel's attention to detail and all the preparation. And these are things that speak to LeBron. Do they still speak to him in the same way, in the third season with a completely different roster? I don't know. And to be honest, it's difficult to know because of the setup of this season with COVID and not having the same access to players, not even being able to observe body language in a locker room. It's much harder.
It's just different.
I haven't heard anything. I've not heard anything in terms of LeBron having truly soured on Vogel. I have not.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think LeBron's attitude is, if you don't give me a crappy coach, somebody, if you find me someone who clears the basic bar, I'll figure the rest out. Would I prefer the best coach out there? Sure, but I don't need it. And I think Vogel absolutely clears that bar. All right. Anyway, thanks again to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day. Make sure you are subscribing to Locked On Lakers on YouTube as well. Lots of cool stuff coming as we get going through the season. We got some plans and schemes and things that we want to try to do as the season goes along. So we appreciate all the support there, and we'll see everybody on Thursday.